Teachers, what was the worst thing a substitute teacher did while you were gone? I'm a little late to the party, but here as goes. I had a grade 1/2 class last year and one student had diabetes. Let's call him Adam. So Adam had a cell phone that beeps when his blood sugar is too low high. It's connected to the monitor in his arm hip. The cell phone has no other uses, no apps, no data, not connected to the school Wi-Fi. The substitute saw his phone on his desk and promptly took it away as per the no devices rule. During gym class an EA comes in to make sure everything is okay, and Adam is visibly ill, pale, sweating, the whole works. Luckily the CA knows Adam's medical plan, instantly asks the Adam for the phone and he explains that the substitute took it away in the morning. The EA then loses IT on the substitute demanding the phone. The substitute calls in the principal to reprimand the EA, then get reprimanded herself as obviously she did not read the student's safety plans. She was asked to leave and the principal taught the class the rest of the day. Adam was fine, drank a couple juice boxes and had a granola bar. Mum picked him up shortly after. That teacher was a B. Good to hear that Adam was okay though. Back when I was a teacher, I had a sub decide my plans weren't good enough for her and went rogue. She decided to show my students videos of animals giving birth on YouTube. I taught English. WAT. Student here. TLDR. Sub demanded I turn over my heart monitor in front of the class. Junior year I was having major heart problems and had to wear a heart monitor 15 hours a day. It had a phone attached that when I had heart murmurs, it would send the data to my doctor. I was wearing it and started having heart issues. It buzzed and I went to click send when the sub demanded I turn over my cell phone. I started to explain why I couldn't and she snapped at me, so I lifted my shirt to show the wires and sensors strapped to my chest in front of the class of 50 students. Choir class. I've never seen anyone's face drop that fast in my life. I've had so many bad subs. One sub made an elementary student cry insisting her own name was misspelled and made her stand up in front of the class and admit her name was spelled wrong. I asked that she not return, but I still saw her around as other teachers had her sub. Another one worth mentioning was supposed to be my sub for the last 2 weeks of school because I went on maternity leave, this time teaching at a 7th 12th grade school. Ignored all my sub plans, played on his cell phone the whole time, and then like 3 days in got upset at the students and told them off, and then they watched as he walked out to the parking lot and drove away. Thank goodness some kids went and told the office. When I came back it was like my room had been ransacked. It was awful. Went to sleep for 1.5 hours. My class was freaking amazing. The sweetest, most thoughtful group I've ever had. When I got back the next day, I asked how the sub was. Me. How was the sub? Them. He was fine. He kinda took a nap for a while. Me. What? What did you guys do? Them. Worked quietly so that we wouldn't wake him up. Eventually we ran out of work, so we just had silent reading. Me. For how long? Them. From when we started working until it was time to go outside. Me. That's a really long time. Look, I am glad that you guys were so thoughtful, but if something like that ever happens again, please wake the sub up. It's not safe for the sub to sleep. He needed to be awake in case something happened. Them. We would have woken him up if we really needed to, but we also figured he probably really needed the sleep. Seriously, the sweetest class ever. The first year I taught 5th grade, I really wanted to do something special for my students before Christmas vacation. I spoke with my team and we came up with the idea to make every student a personalized Christmas ornament. We were going to surprise them by displaying the ornaments on a Christmas tree the day before vacation and they would be able to take them home. I was gone for a department thing the day before we were going to set up the tree, and one of the least liked subs was scheduled for my class. Since I had stored all the ornaments in my closet, I simply asked if the students needed any supplies. Make sure to get them yourself and not let them see the surprise. The thing about this sub, and the reason she wasn't liked, was that her first line of defense was always threatening to take away something from for misbehaving. Recess, free time, lunch, etc. I think you know where I'm going with this. Fast forward to the end of the day, I get back to my classroom in the last 30 minutes of class so I could dismiss them when all of a sudden, I met with 25 kids asking about their ornaments. I tried to play dumb and asked them what they were talking about, and of course they informed me the sub said something. She told the students about the ornaments and said if they misbehaved, she would tell me and I would take away their ornaments. Instantly, I was filled with horror that the surprise was ruined for all 5th grade. They're kids, they told the whole grade during recess. Anger because that dang sub ruined the surprise. Sad disappointment because I really wanted to see their faces when they walked through the door the next day and saw a special Christmas tree with their personalized ornament. It's not the biggest deal or anything, but I was really upset that weekend. To this day, when I talk to my old partners, I still refer to her as the Grinch. I would be upset too. I'm sure making all the ornaments took a long time. And it absolutely wasn't right for her to ruin the surprise. It wasn't even her surprise. How rude. Rearranged my room. Not in a move student A away from student B and put her by student C way. In a move the giant rug over to the opposite corner of the room. And completely change the layout of student desks. And rearrange a bookshelf way. I had a cool Chinese lucky cat that went missing after I had a sub. My students said the sub seemed really intrigued by it, talked about it several times, and even moved it from the shelf where it sat and brought it over to my desk. It was gone when I returned the next day. Not a teacher, but I vividly remember one incident of having a substitute in kindergarten. I had an infected cut on my toe and had been prescribed an antibiotic. That morning was the first time I took it. We were sitting on the floor for roll call and I remember this burning pain in my abdomen. And she told us to get up and go to our desks. I tried to get up only to realize I couldn't move and just laid back. This sub was a total cow and I remember she was always really mean. Anyway, she starts yelling at me for being attention seeking and basically tries to pull me up. I am in so much pain I start screaming and one of the teachers from the classroom next to ours comes, realizes I am not faking it and calls an ambulance. Long story short, I am horribly allergic to penicillin and my kidneys were failing. I was in hospital for almost a week before I got discharged. Needless to say, that absolute B was not allowed back at the school, but I will never forget that day. I'm also allergic to penicillin and know quite a few others who are as well. It's always surprised me how easily it gets prescribed, but the allergy is almost never tested for. I don't know anyone who didn't learn about their allergy the hard way. Not a teacher, but I know this was a disaster for my teacher. We had been studying Romeo and Juliet and West Side Story and our teacher had created a very comprehensive exam where we would be asked to compare and contrast characters, situations, and themes of the two as answers to some very specific questions. He had spent countless hours ensuring that it was fair and complete. We were going to have the exam the following Monday and he was taking Friday off. So he told us that in addition to the weekend, we should also use Friday's class to prepare for the exam. His instructions to the substitute were likely something like, tell them to prepare for the exam. They already know what to do. She marched in and shouted, prepare for an exam, and proceeded to hand it out. Of course, we protested, but what substitute hasn't heard? We're not supposed to get the exam today, from a class at one time or another. When Monday came, the teacher was devastated. He could not count the scores. He wouldn't even attempt to grade it. He did not feel right giving the exam now that we had seen it. All the work he put into it and all the insights he suspected he might gain from scoring it were lost. Instead, we spent the day reviewing what we could have, should have, would have answered. As you can tell, I could really feel his pain. This makes me really sad for your teacher. He sounds like one of the good ones. Not a teacher, but in 9th grade my algebra I teacher had her baby early in the year, so she was gone till the last month or 2 months of the school year. The sub was a former teacher, so you'd think she'd be a great sub. Nope. She hyper-focused on 3-4 out of the 28 students in the class and just teach them while completely ignoring the rest of us. She'd pass out a worksheet, then go to her students and never acknowledge us again till she dismissed us. Never checked homework, never acknowledged us. If anyone outside of her favorite students raised their hand or spoke up, they were ignored, etc. Which went about as well as you expected with a bunch of 14-15-year-olds. That class was just wild. The kids who actually stayed in the classroom anyway. It was a mess. I'm actually surprised we weren't reported or visited by the teachers on either side of us for how loud we were. After several months with this lady, the vice principal was walking around randomly checking classrooms and walked into our crap show algebra I class. He lost it, yelled at all of us to sit down and shut up, which he also didn't acknowledge, demanded she leave and sat with us the rest of the period. Never saw her again and had maybe 6-7 different subs after her. 2 weeks after this, our regular teacher came back. When she realized we had learned nothing and learned the extent of how useless this lady had been, she started tearing up. I passed the classroom on the way to the bathroom during the next period and saw her sobbing at her desk. A friend of my mom's worked at the central office where they assigned or organized the substitute teachers. That lady was permanently taken off the substitute list. Freaking hate teachers like that. Serves her right. There was a harpsichord in the front of the classroom used both for demonstration and performance. Not knowing what he was doing, the sub tried to tune 3 notes that had gone mildly out of tune while I was away. He managed to break the strings on all 3 notes and left a message inside reading, "Sorry about that." There was a secret harpsichord at my university. Not to everyone obviously, but most of the music majors didn't know it existed. I was teaching myself piano at the time and played the wheels off the bad boy after discovering it. If I could have strapped it to my car, I would have taken it home after spring semester. I had a sub give out my cell phone number to my high school students so they could call me and give me excuses as to why they weren't taking their test while I was gone. I was livid. I complained to the sub office, and that teacher never subbed for my building again. And that is the story about why you changed your phone number. A few of the periods I taught were co-teach classes where a percentage of the students in the class have special needs but can work well enough in a general population classroom with assistance from a special education co-instructor. These classes were often very rewarding to teach. But one downside of teaching that population from a logistical standpoint is that I was often required to attend odd meetings. Basically every special education student has a meeting about twice a year, sometimes more frequently depending on need, where administrators, teachers, counselors, parents, guardians, and the student themselves all get together to go over their status and review the various educational accommodations the student is receiving to determine what may or may not need to change to best suit their needs. I didn't have a problem with attending these meetings per se, but because they only take 1 period, and several teachers are rotating through various meetings over the course of a day, the school had devoted art subs who were more akin to babysitters, at best, than substitute educators. That means that during that 1 period, heck can randomly break loose. One year I had a tough student who had some serious attitude problems, but was a good person underneath it all and with whom I'd done a lot of work with to improve her engagement and interest in my class. About halfway through the year, I got called for an odd meeting during the period I had said student. In my absence of 45 minutes, the sub decided to pick a petty argument with my kid, who was rightfully offended but unwisely overreacted and escalated things to making threats and nearly coming to blows with the sub, to where she ended up within school suspension for a while. Getting the story from all parties and witnesses involved later, it's pretty clear the sub was to blame, and the kid who I'd worked so hard with was back at square one. I eventually got her back on track, and she ended up with one of the highest grades in my class at the end of the year, but I could only imagine how much better she could have been without the setback and the amount of trust in adults she'd lost. This makes me so incredibly angry and sad. I've also had the privilege of seeing how kids like that can grow when given the chance, and the times when I've seen some other adult come and knock their progress down left me absolutely infuriated. He peed in my desk chair. Swear. 2. He apparently peed in my chair and the students noticed it and mentioned it to him. He ignored them and just sat there anyway with a huge puddle of urine on the floor. The kids called security on him. I came in the next day and sat in the chair. It was wet, and about that time a security guard stuck her head in the door and said, "Don't sit there. That guy peed in your chair." This happened to my colleague, but I was the classroom next door. My colleague was showing Clash of the Titans at the end of the year after a unit on ancient Greece. There is mild nudity at the beginning and the end of the movie, but they were in the middle of the movie so there shouldn't have been an issue. He left the video paused at the right spot. We still had VCRs like 10 years ago when this happened, but the sub somehow managed to show both the nudity at the beginning and the end of the movie. The nudity scenes were hours apart and the class was only 40 minutes. Then, the sub wrote an email to the principal about how my colleague made him show nudity. I taught middle school math and English in the 90s and the sub didn't know how to convert a decimal into a fraction and kept insisting that the students who did know how to do it were wrong. She also apparently didn't know how to pronounce 5 of our 20 vocabulary words and didn't know what half of them meant. I feel like freaking division is like a baseline for what anyone going into any field in teaching should be able to do. She let the kids run wild and do whatever they wanted. First graders. I was out because my dad died. Thank God my team realized what happened and all pulled together and cleaned the room, put it back together before I returned to work. From one internet stranger to another, my condolences. I came back after being gone one day and my students told me the substitute teacher flipped over tables in a rage and was escorted from the building by a cop. What actually happened is that the sub left the room to take a 20 minutes phone call and the kids thought it would be funny to flip the tables over. The substitutes then had to flip the tables right side up while yelling at the kids. Then, during lunch, my special ed co-teacher came into my room to set up and caught the sub making out with a student. Turns out she was 18 to his 25 and the 20 minutes phone call was to set up the lunch meeting. The principal then had him escorted from the building by the resource officer. This is why I say having a sub is more work than just coming into school my dang self. I'll just come do it my dang self. LOL, that's how I see you pep talking yourself when you are wanting a day off but don't want the drama. When I was a substitute, I got a lot of requested jobs because the substitute pool was poor. One such example given to me was a substitute who would just go to sleep. I barely believed it. Once I was teaching full time. I had a sub come in for a day. When I got back my students told me that he told them to leave him alone, sat down, and went to sleep. I believed it then. Didn't do anything to the kids, but told the kids that the reason I was out was because my mom was having breast cancer surgery. I teach K5 and I specifically didn't tell the kids because I didn't want them to worry. So, when I came back, I had a bunch of kids come up to me asking about my mom, which was so sweet, but not something the kids should have had to worry about. Not a teacher but I participate in STEM programs a lot. In the 90s I belonged to a club that refurbished old industrial PCs and donated them to schools. Sometimes we'd get completely burned out motherboards or disk drives, so I took a bunch of those and made displays showing the insides of computers, and I'd let the kids explore them as part of my session. Then I'd dig out a couple of blown PCs and monitors, hand out the screwdrivers and let them rip them apart. Yes, I was always careful around the old tube monitors. Once they were done I'd let them pick apart if they wanted to take home. The younger kids especially loved this, and frequently I'd see some kids take home a hard drive controller or a graphics card like it was a real treasure. I even made the local news with my program. That's the thing about living in a small city. Eventually everyone makes the news. So one day I went in to do my lesson at a high school, I think freshman or sophomore science class. The class had a substitute and I had an act right after that session. So I told them I'd come back to pick everything up the next day. The kids could take whatever they wanted from the old PCs, but please put my displays aside, in the cupboard. Next day I came by and all my displays were still out and they were completely trashed. Worse yet, the sub's attitude was, well, kids will be kids. That was the last session I did, ever, for that program. I had left out, overnight, eggs that I was going to use in a science experiment the following day. I was out and thought nothing about it. I returned the following day and went looking for the eggs only to find them missing. Asked a student where they went and I was informed that the substitute took the class to the special education kitchen, hard-boiled them and ate them. I went to talk to my AP and was informed that the sub had called in sick for her job for that day, due to food poisoning. Karma. My 9th grade English teacher was fired, which is an entire other story, and the school had difficulty finding someone to fill the spot. We would have random subs, but they didn't really teach us. So eventually we had a different person babysit us each day all week. One time it was the very scary principal who just glared at us like we were convicts about to escape, the school's police officers who at least talked to us, and various teachers for one-day stints. I don't know why one of our 5 librarians couldn't have been in there going through grade appropriate books at the least. We spent 2-3 months like that. Not a teacher but the sub made the handicapped classmate who has muscle, joint and vision complications go grab his textbook from his home room. He's not completely helpless but when it comes to heavy things, he needs help. Classmate's homeroom was halfway across campus and the required book consists of 5 large text volumes because they're specifically made for his poor vision. He can't wear glasses either due to complications. I offered to help because I'm usually the one that goes and grabs it for him during normal class but the sub yelled at me saying he knows my kind and I'm just trying to get out of class. Sub told me he's not there to play games and for me to quit it before he sends me off to the principal's office. Needless to say the entire class was shocked. Classmate came back with another student from the homeroom requesting that next time the sub send someone else to grab the books because my classmate can't carry it by himself. When my usual teacher came back we requested the sub not return because of what he said to us and did to classmate. My teacher wrote an email to the principal about it and that was the end of that. I caught the flu the week my students had a district benchmark test. I could feel that I was coming down with something, so I stayed late to put together really in-depth review packets and slideshows. I wrote pages of directions for the substitute and separated the reviews out by class numbers. I even included my personal number and told them to call me anytime if a student had a question they couldn't answer. I spent about 5 hours putting everything together after school, while battling around a 103 temp. The substitute completely ignored my instructions. She instead took every single piece of construction paper and cardstock in my classroom from my personal locker that I had left open for her in case she needed something, and had the students make flip books about their feelings. They used thousands of pieces of paper and craft supplies, probably around $100 of my own personal supplies. This was for freshmen in high school. I'm still bitter. I'm still bitter, and rightfully so. Gave out snacks I bought with my own money that I kept for kids who stayed after to get tutoring. Threw out a broken electric pencil sharpener that kids broke in front of her, which again, I bought with my own money and couldn't get replaced by the company because I had no product to send back. I still don't have a sharpener for my room. Let the kids go through my things in my cabinets and desk. Lost a bunch of stuff that way. Not a teacher, but a student with a story nonetheless. Meet Mrs. Hostess. Fake name Obv. Every time my 8th grade history teacher was out, Mrs. Hostess would usually sub for him. Not sure why, because she subbed other classes too, but all the incidents of note happened when she subbed for history. 1. There happened to be a girl in the class who shared a name with an Irish folk song. Every time Mrs. Hostess took attendance, when she got to folk song girl, she sang the whole song, every time. 2. The history teacher kept candy and snacks in his desk, lollipops, that he'd hand out for correct answers or just because, some leftover Halloween candy, and the Twinkie. The Twinkie was not an ordinary Twinkie. The Twinkie was an experiment in processed food. This Twinkie was still in its original individual packaging and looked normal at first glance, but was actually 3 years past expiration and rock solid. The history teacher demonstrated this by standing on the Twinkie during one of the first weeks of classes. All said to say, this is a thoroughly inedible Twinkie. So Mrs. Hostess subbed again, and we knew she discovered the lollipop stash because she was openly eating them during class. But it wasn't until the next day that our history teacher opened his desk drawer to find that the Twinkie was gone. This woman ate an expired, solid Twinkie as well as literally all the food candy in the teacher's desk. A girl in the class who shared a name with an Irish folk song. Poor sweet Molly Malone. I was a teacher's assistant while in college. The teacher and I took a week-long workshop and had a sub. The worst thing she did, not letting the kids go potty. It was in kindergarten and she said all the kids going to bathroom were interrupting the class. One girl wet herself. School policy was if kids under a certain age had an accident the nurse would give them a pull-up, basically a diaper to wear. The substitute proceeded to make fun of the girl for wear a diaper, calling her baby and such. The little girl ended facing repercussions at home too. It was devastating to hear about. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.